Thank you for coming and welcome to today's talk. The topic for today is the need for deep self care. I've noticed that since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, I've been hearing many voices calling for change in the world. In particular, how to envision the world and how to engage with that vision and how to ground that vision into action, engaged action. Particularly, I've been hearing the calls for racial justice and social equality. Excuse me. Environmental sustainability and political change, at least in the United States at this time. All of these things are important, and deep self care is required for any sustained effort, in part to avoid burnout, disillusionment, and despair, particularly for those engaging in social action, whether it's advocacy or some form of activism. For some of us, it's easy to get caught up in feelings of, I'm not doing enough toward working toward these causes that I believe in, whatever those happen to be. And underlying that feeling, tapping into the deeper place of insecurity that dwells in all of us, a feeling like I am not enough because I'm not doing enough. With all these voices clamoring for my attention, especially when they're speaking about and out of love, caring, and compassion for the world around us, it can be very challenging for me and those of us who need a different focus to maintain balance and remain centered. Sorry for that chirping. My smoke alarm battery needs changing. As much as severe chronic illness and extensive debilitation pervade my daily life, it's easy for me to normalize this and forget I'm a member of a vulnerable population of people who have been living long term with basic human needs that are chronically unmet or insufficiently met. That leads to a form of malnourishment, a starvation, if you will, of essential human nutriments, just as chronic um, physical starvation of food and essential nutrients is a form of food starvation. In a recent vision for myself at this time, deep self care has become obvious to me as a core and primary focus. I cannot afford to take on others' agendas, even when I agree with them, even when I believe that timely engaged action in the world is important at this time, even when the human and social need speaks to my heart. I need to remember that I am in need of care and rescuing. An example of this that helps me remember and prioritize the importance of my individual needs came from a water rescue class I took in college. They taught that when approaching a situation in which someone needed saving in a water situation, there was a way to prioritize or triage the approach to take. This was formulated as reach, wade, row, go. With each level of intervention or rescuing increasingly becoming more risky to the rescuer. First, reach from a place of security like the ground or a dock. The second would be to wade out to the person. The third would be to row out to the person. And the fourth, to go in person, which would mean to swim out. Um, the reason for this triage is because if you're trying to help in the rescuing position, in the rescuing role, you want to limit the possibility that you will become an additional person who is now a victim also in need of rescuing. And then there becomes two people needing rescuing. Why do they have to teach this? Well, in part, it's an important triage approach. And remembering to minimize the risk to the rescuer, in part because it maximizes the resources available to minimize the risk to the person who is the additional resource that they are contributing to the situation. What I didn't really get at that time was how important it is to try to prevent myself from becoming a person in need of rescuing also. At this time in my life, and for a while now, I'm already swamped with ongoing life challenges that wear upon multiple and multidimensional vulnerabilities and limited resources that can be brought to bear to shore up these vulnerabilities and overcome the challenges. Even so, there are things I can do. The first and most important thing I need to do is commit to deep self-care. This is a form of embodying the change I wish to see in the world, where every human's needs are considered important and are held with care. Of course, that doesn't mean that everyone's needs can be met all the time. In my experience, that's not the way life works. Yet, holding the needs as important meets a deep human need for being seen, valued, and cared for, that helps us endure the difficult times that come in life. By prioritizing and committing to deep self-care, I'm gradually and increasingly becoming a living example and naturally expressing what I deeply value, even when I'm feeling more ill, out of it, incapacitated, or more vulnerable than usual. Sometimes the best and most important thing one can do is to discover what is needed to let this light shine. and do that. I'm finding this to be one of the most vulnerable and courageous acts I've undertaken in this lifetime. Since I know this rhythmic movement I'm undergoing at this time is a fundamental human experience, I know I'm not alone in this, in feeling this need for deep self-care, even while tumultuous change is happening in the broader society around me. I therefore call each and every one of you who is also feeling a need for prioritizing deep self-care at this time to find your individual ways of prioritizing and manifesting that. I have 2 suggestions to offer that may help with this. The first is to find or create some physical symbol and place that somewhere in your space where you will regularly encounter it so that it can help remind you of your commitment. I think it may have been Sigyal Rinpoche who is quoted as saying, "The most important thing is remembering the most important thing." So, first of all, identifying what the most important thing for you personally at this time in your life is most important is the first step. The second step then is helping cultivate ways to remember what is most important. So, having some physical symbol in your space is a reminder that can help you remember. A physical symbol could be an object or a drawing. It could be something as that's already sacred to you, some object that's already meaningful to you, or something as mundane as a needle and thread. Whatever it is, whatever it is, imbuing it with your commitment and intention consecrates it as a sacred object that can help you manifest your aspiration. A couple of examples I've brought are some greeting cards. This one is a sympathy card with deepest sympathy. It's meant for people who've lost someone, a person or an animal companion, and are in grief. For me, this can help remind me, I got it for myself, to help remember to hold as important the pain and grieving that's inside of me. And here's a card I received from a friend with a statue of Buddha. It also has a saying, when in doubt, breathe in, breathe out. So that this can help me remember when I am feeling very distressed or disconnected, and I don't know what to do, I'm in doubt. I can simply focus on breathing in and breathing out. And I don't have to remember or engage in any more complex coping strategy. So for me, I find that both a symbolic image of some kind, along with some key words that help me remember, are can be important tools to use as a physical object in my space. The second strategy I'd like to offer is that of taking sacred pauses. This is a core informal practice I learned from Tara Brach. It's a way of putting life on pause for as few as 3 or 4 deep breaths. It can be longer than that, a minute or 2 or 5. Often I'll set a timer to put a limit on the end of it so I don't get caught in worrying if I'm taking up too much time. Taking a sacred pause interrupts trance states and pattern behavior you might be in. It helps us to come out of the automatic behavior, automatic pilot that can happen so easily and readily, and to deepen attention. In this way, this practice creates space that makes it more possible to remember your aspirations, to remember what's most important to you, to touch into your deeper inner resources, and shift your focus if necessary so that your actions and engagement are more fully in alignment with your higher, deeper purpose. And so that those actions and that engagement flows more naturally from that intention and aspiration with less effort, greater sincerity, and a grounding that comes from the kind of authenticity that others will sense. Some part of their being will respond to this, whether or not they or you are aware of that response on a conscious level. In this way, being, or rather living, the change we want to be in the world ripples outward to positively affect and benefit many beings. In my experience and from what I've known of others, very little of that positive benefit will ever come back into my awareness. I am always grateful when people volunteer feedback about how something I've done or a way I've been has positively benefited them. Especially, I find it especially valuable when I wasn't even trying to be of benefit specifically. I was just being and living how I needed to be and live in that moment. And I also get especially tickled when I get to hear of the second degree ripple, how the positive change that a person I encountered experienced then rippled outward to someone they were in contact with. I'm not sure if I've ever heard of any of the third degree ripples, which apparently recently scientifically has been demonstrated that there are known to be scientifically 3 degrees of ripples, which means, of course, there are probably more than that. They're just have not yet been scientifically demonstrable. Anyhow, on a personal note, I wanted to share that most of my life I've automatically and unconsciously prioritized the needs of others far above my own needs. And I could only justify self-care, caring for this being, the life that is here, as a means to the end of being able to provide more care for others. Much of this caring for others was done in a way that chronically sacrificed myself and my needs. There are particular kinds of situations where I was more vulnerable to that than other situations. But such a pattern leads to depletion. Any organism has to have its own needs regularly met. We have to have our own cup refilled over and over again, or else we move into a chronic state of depletion, being less resourced for both self and others. A key part of why my current commitment to deep self care brings up such feelings of vulnerability and is therefore such a courageous act is because I am now ranking my personal needs above the needs of others, perhaps for the first time in my life. Certainly for the first time with this degree of depth and breadth of commitment. In closing, I'd like to touch on this concept in Western psychology of negative grandiosity. This is a situation where a person believes that something good applies to everyone else in the world, yet I am somehow so special in a negative way that I'm the only one I exclude from being deserving of this good thing. However, if I truly believe that it's important to treat my neighbor as I would myself, that means I must also learn how to treat myself as I would my neighbor. Namaste, and thank you for listening.